first of all, we thank you for that because we know you're busy. But Trevor is a New Zealand author, speaker, and political activist who maintains a prolific and controversial blog. Controversial, you, Trevor? Entitled New Zealand. He is a founder and editor of KeyWiki, a website dedicated to exposing the covert activities of American politicians. Trevor Loudon was also the vice president of ACT, New Zealand Party, from 2006 to 2008. Now, I've got 3 pages on him. I'm not going to read any more because I want you to hear it from him. But he is absolutely incredible. How many got his book? Okay, so there's a few more of you that got to get by to get his book and get Dave Benner's book. Where'd Benner go? I hope he's still. Dave, okay, make sure you're up here, Dave, after you speak. You got to get these books. We don't have them all the time, okay? So make sure you get there. And his wife also said he's got a trailer. It depends how far we go tonight to what we can get done. But if not, we'll give you the address on YouTube for the trailer. But Trevor, you've been goofing around enough this evening. It's about time you go to work, don't you think? Give him a big round of applause.
Thanks very much, Jack and Jake. Can all you guys hear me? Yeah. Can you understand a real southern accent? Thanks very much, thanks for coming. I had a real great afternoon with Jack and Jake today. We talked a lot about hunting, you know, like deer and various other varmints and socialists and things like that. It's good fun. Now, my first time ever speaking in Minnesota, so I'm honoured to be amongst you, and thanks for coming along tonight, people. Everybody says to me, Reagan always said you should start with a funny story. So I had an incident in Los Angeles not long ago. I went to a street vendor, I bought some food, you know, from a small businessman. He said to me, "Oh, you have an accent. Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from New Zealand." He said, "Well, where's that?" I said, "Well, it's down by Australia." He said, "Ah, where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes from." So that's Common Core geography for you people. But look, everybody always says to me, why do I come to the United States? And I say there are 2 basic reasons. The first is gratitude. You know, my country was saved from invasion by the Japanese in World War II by the massive sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that's a very strong memory in my country, folks. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. Right. If freedom should ever fail in the United States, if you lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which are in grave danger, the bad guys of this planet, and I'm talking Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their Islamic allies, and they are allies, people. They will carve up this planet amongst themselves. And you look around this world now, and if you're an ally of America, like Israel or Germany or Canada or Australia or South Korea or Japan, you'd be freaking out right now because you see that the American president loves the bad guys of the planet a lot more than he loves the good guys. It's causing big instability. You know, your allies are looking at you and they're wondering, is it worth being America's friend? They saw what your president did to Poland and the Czech Republic. one of his first acts of office was to cancel a missile shield that was supposed to protect them from the Russians. Then they saw him abandon Georgia to the Russians. Then when there was a genuine rebellion in Iran against the mullahs, Obama did nothing. Thousands died. Then when the Communist Party of Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood took over that country and kicked out your ally Mubarak, Obama cheered them on.
Yes. Yep.
And now they're looking at the Ukraine, folks. We need to remember what Napoleon said about the Ukraine. Whoever controls the Ukraine controls Europe. Whoever controls Europe controls the world. The Ukraine is a big deal, people. If the Russians can take the Ukraine, they will take Europe. And then they will come after you. People, the Ukraine has a treaty signed in your Senate under Bill Clinton, guaranteeing that country American protection in the event of Russian military aggression. They gave up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for an American promise. And now that they need it, folks, where is it? So far, Obama has sent them a few $100 million of non-lethal aid and John Kerry. Who is John Kerry? He's basically Jane Fonda with less testosterone. But to be fair to Mr. Obama, he did enact some sanctions on some rich Russians to terrify Mr. Putin into submission. I saw a rally in downtown Moscow, a pro-Putin rally. A woman held up a sign that summed it up beautifully. The sign said, "Your pornography is harder than your sanctions." That's how terrified they are, folks. So you have a situation, put it this way, Obama has abandoned Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength. And what happens to your peace when you lose your strength, folks? Do you think Putin would be trying to re-establish the old Soviet empire? Do you think China would be threatening the Philippines and Japan? Do you think Iran would be threatening Israel? Do you think ISIS would be committing unimaginable atrocities in the Middle East if you had a Reagan in the White House today?
No.
But thousands of people are dying, folks, and the world is on the brink of major warfare because this country has twice elected an anti-American president.
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Obama thinks peace is breaking out all over. So therefore, this is the time to gut your military. This is the time to cut your Navy back to pre-World War II levels, your Army back to pre-World War I levels. This is the time to cancel weapon systems right, left and centre, to destroy the morale of your military with the gay policy, women in combat, and rock bottom morale, rock bottom pay. Obama wants to cut your nuclear arsenal down to 265 nukes and then down to 0. The Russians alone have more than 14,000 people. They're ahead of you now in conventional forces. That's just the Russians, not counting their Chinese and Cuban and Nicaraguan and Iranian allies. They're ahead of you now. And Obama is gutting your military. People, this is not about a depression. You're Americans and you'll fight your way out of a depression. This is not even about losing your rights because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before where your commander-in-chief is alienating your allies, empowering your enemies, and gutting your military? What is the inevitable consequence of that, people? Where is that going to lead? Lose your strength, you lose your peace, folks. big consequences for all of us. And if America goes down, don't think of bugging out to New Zealand, because the Chinese will have us in a heartbeat. There's nowhere left to run, folks. This is the last stand for liberty. And people say, look, Obama's out of his depth. He's stupid. He doesn't understand foreign policy. If Obama was just stupid, would he not make some mistakes in your favour once in a while?
Yes.
You know, this is a guy who was mentored by pro-Soviet Marxists like Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii, by Alice Palmer in Chicago, the woman who got him his first job in politics. Both of these people were involved with the Communist Party USA. Both of them were peace activists, peace movement activists. The goal of the peace movement, which has always been communist controlled, is to alienate you from your allies and to gut your military so that their friends in Russia and China can rule this planet. What do you think Alice Palmer and Frank Marshall Davis would think of the job that Obama has done on your military, people? They'd be pretty darn proud, don't you think? Look, I think the most significant thing your president said in his entire first term of office was in South Korea. Off mic, thought no one was listening, talking to then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Yes, Mr. Medvedev, when I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. How much more of a warning do you need, guys? This is not stupidity, people. This is a deliberate takedown of the world's greatest power by its executive. Now my books, I've got both of my books here next to my wife Victoria. We got married 7 weeks ago, by the way. 7 of the best and most challenging weeks of my life, I would say. Definitely the best. But the first book was Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. Nearly 700 pages on Obama's communist, Marxist, anti-American, pro-Palestinian ties. And to be honest, people, it's a very big book. And I got really, really sick of lugging it around the country, I can tell you. And I vowed and declared that my next book would be smaller and lighter. And this one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists and Progressives in the US Congress. And guess what? It's bigger. Because those bloody commies just kept on coming, folks. The deeper I dug, the more I found. And I couldn't leave out Al Franken, could I? Or Keith Ellison. And the next edition, coming out next year, will also include Betty McCollum and maybe even Amy herself.
Yeah.
But the book is really about the 2 big secrets of modern communism. It's been made into a movie, by the way, but we'll talk about that later. The 2 big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil, because we all know that the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And what have the communists been telling you in the last 20 years, folks? Pretty much the same thing, right? Don't exist, we're not a threat. Why would they tell you that? The second big secret of modern communism, which is hardly ever discussed in the thousands of books on the subject, I think mine is the first. It is the ability of a tiny Marxist party, maybe a few hundred comrades strong. It is their ability to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. So What I'm saying is, less than 20,000 card-carrying communists in this country are right now writing the laws that control the lives of more than 340 million Americans. A little bit far-fetched, is it not? Well, the mechanism they use, and this should resonate in Minnesota, is control of organised labour, the labour unions. Now, you were very lucky in America for a long time because your AFL-CIO was run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. They kept the Reds out of the unions, folks. But in 1995, everything changed. Massive political change in this country, and I bet you never heard a word about it. That was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, people like Michael Paymar in your state legislature, for instance, who's now gone, thankfully, that was the year they took over the AFL-CIO. They kicked out Lane Kirkland and they put their member, John Sweeney, in as president. They then took over every major labour union, SEIU, AFSCME, NEA, United Auto Workers, Labourers, you name it, they took it over. They then started to purge the Democratic Party of people they did not like. They got rid of the Southern Dixiecrats, the moderates, the Conservative Democrats. Joe Lieberman, the senator from Connecticut, was one of the last to go, far too pro-Israel for their taste. And now they own that party. They completely own it, folks. And if you buck their line, if you disobey them, you will find yourself like Robert Menendez, the senator from New Jersey, facing corruption charges or something similar. Fancy a corrupt Democrat. I bet you could get most of them on corruption charges, folks. But the point is this, 20,000 Marxists took over the unions, and by taking over the unions, they took over the Democratic Party. Ever wondered why the Democrats have gone so far lunatic left over the last 15 years, folks? Because they're taking their cue from the unions who are controlled by the communists. And they are writing policy. They don't just want to control the Democrats, they want their policy implemented through the Democrats. The process is simple. The communists come up with a policy. It might be socialisation of student loans, card check, green jobs, cap and trade, normalisation of relations with Cuba, which they just got. It might be Obamacare. It might be an American alliance with Iran, and that is coming, people. It might be a New START treaty with Russia. All of these are communist policies. They started out with the communist movement. The communists made them labour union policy, and the unions made them Democrat policy. That is how 20,000 communists are dictating the policies of the laws of this land, folks. Now, I want to talk about an example of this that's happening right now. It's affecting every state, and it's going to have major implications for this country, thank you, if it's not corrected. And that is comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty. How many of you knew that's a communist policy, folks? A few of you? Well, I'll explain how it works. But before I talk about the communist angle, I want to talk about the Republicans who are backing this. Because you have Republicans who tell you, the Lindsey Grahams and the Jeb Bushes, now this is an inverted commas, you understand that, the John McCains, who tell you that amnesty will be good for the GOP. Because if you give 8 or 10 or 12 or 20 million, who knows, if you give them all citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful they'll all become staunch conservatives, right? Yeah, it's just delusional, people. We know that the Latinos, who are the bulk of the illegals, are often very socially conservative, good Christian people, but they vote overwhelmingly Democrat. And they don't change quickly, people. Maybe they will change in 20, 30, 40 years, who knows? But we have one election cycle left, folks. One election cycle left to save this country. They ain't going to change in that time, not in big numbers. So why do these Republicans tell you this garbage, folks? Well, more than that, it's worse than that. Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent more than $1.7 billion promoting amnesty in the last 10 years? What do you think the Chamber wants out of it, guys? Is it hard to guess? Cheap labour. Because the Chamber is all about profit. And I believe in profit. I believe in business. But if you're an ethical business person, if you're going to make a profit, should you not also pay your costs? Yes. So the profits of cheap labour will go to the Chamber of Commerce and its supporters. But the costs of those profits are the destruction of your border integrity, the massive endangerment of your national security, and the massive lowering of respect for the rule of law in your land. Big cost, people. The Chamber's going to take the profits. Who is going to pay the costs? You. The Chamber takes the profits, you pay the costs. Is that ethical business? No. And is it any coincidence that the Republicans who tell you this garbage tend to be the ones most closely allied to the Chamber of Commerce and big agribusiness? Or am I being a little bit over-conspiratorial? What do you think?
Truthful.
But the real driver of this started out with the communist movement. This started out in California in the 1950s with a Communist Party member named Bert Corona. He was also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs in the early 1960s, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, mainly on Saul Alinsky, church money, a whole network through the southern border states and Southern California of support groups for illegals. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, to get them work in factories and farms, get them citizenship and voting. The voting was the key goal, folks. Now, Corona trained a whole bunch of henchmen to carry on his work for him when he passed on. 3 of them are very prominent today in Southern California. They work closely together and they have transformed that state and your country. The first of them is a man called Antonio Villagrosa, until recently the mayor of Los Angeles. A hardcore Marxist. He used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and the illegals flooded in the hundreds of thousands, changed the entire demographics of the state. Second member of this group, a Communist Party supporter named Gil Cedillo, until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. A big-time amnesty activist. He is the man who got the DREAM Act pushed through in California about 3 years ago, which gave all sorts of so-called rights to the children of what they call undocumented workers. Third member of this group, another Marxist, the most powerful woman in California, in my opinion. It's not one of the Kardashians. Maria Elena Terrazzo, until recently the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is behind the massive union-driven and union paid for Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that have added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 15 years. Almost all of them Democrats. The result of this deliberate Marxist program has been to turn California from a reddish, purplish state to solidly blue. Now all of the Electoral College votes of California, the most populous state in this union, go straight to the Democrats. No contest. Deliberate program, people. Now I want to talk about the man who's leading this movement today. You've seen him on TV, I guarantee it, wearing a purple shirt, leading an immigration rally, an amnesty rally. His name is Eliseo Medina. He's the former Executive Vice President of the SEIU Union. He's a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Marxist. He supports the Communist Party USA, and he served on Obama's Latino Advisory Committee with several other Marxists. He is the man who got the amnesty bill pushed through your Senate about 3 years ago. He then worked with Luis Gutierrez, the Democratic rep from Illinois, to get a bill through the House. Gutierrez, incidentally, is a former member of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist grouping. When that failed, thanks to you, Medina went straight to the president and demanded executive amnesty, which the president granted. Now here's a little question, folks. Any former or current union members in the room tonight? Not trying to persecute anybody, just interested. Well, here's a question. You cast your mind back. 25 years ago, which organisation in the United States was the most hardcore anti-illegal immigration, against illegal immigration? The AFL-CIO and Cesar Chavez and the farm workers. They were constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals. They had people on the border, folks. Why did they fight against illegals? To protect their jobs, folks. To protect their wages and conditions. Very logical, because illegals drive down wages and they cost jobs. So in 2015, which organisation is leading the charge to legalise the illegals? The unions, people. So the unions were against illegals 25 years ago, and now they are supporting them. Why would that be, do you think? I'll tell you. Because before 1995, the unions were there to represent the interests of their members. After 1995, when they were taken over by Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party USA, their agenda changed to promoting Marxist revolution. The illegals are bad for union workers, folks, but they are great for the revolution. The unions are taking their members' money every day and selling their jobs down the river because the revolution comes first, people. And it is not easy to get union members to vote directly against their own interests. It took Eliseo Medina 5 years of hardcore arm twisting and lobbying inside the AFL-CIO to get them to flip their policy from anti-illegal to pro-illegal, which he achieved at their national convention in Louisiana in 2000. The Marxists did it, folks. But the real question is this: why does he want this? And why did Obama grant executive amnesty knowing that it would almost certainly cost him the Senate? Why would they do this, people? Well, Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009. I have him on tape and I quote him in my book. He got up in front of the crowd and said this: passing amnesty is the number one priority of the progressive movement. Not Obamacare, not cap and trade, amnesty. And did he talk about compassion, reuniting families, giving immigrants a break, helping the economy? Not a single word, folks. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we stand by these people and get them citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. In other words, forever. Think about it, folks. Mitt Romney lost by 2.5 million votes. The Democrats get 8, 10, 12, 20 million more Democratic Party votes through amnesty. How does the GOP fight that one, people? The first thing that happens is that Texas will go blue. And if you take the Electoral College votes from Texas, your second most popular state, add them to the Electoral College votes of California, which they already got through illegal immigration, do the math, add the totals. It makes it virtually impossible, except for one caveat, which I'll get to later. It makes it virtually impossible for the Republicans to ever elect another president. Ever. One party state, folks. And if you think the Democrats are arrogant now, what do you think they'll be like with 8, 10, 20 million more Democratic votes in their pockets, folks? Would it just be the IRS they send after you? Would this country become like France or Germany, as some naive conservatives still try to tell you? Or would it become like Venezuela pretty quickly and Cuba not long after? Because that is the plan, people. That is why they're doing this. That is why they risk everything on amnesty. Why would Obama give up the Senate to get amnesty, folks? Because he is a Leninist. One step backwards, 2 steps forward. He gave up the Senate because he knows that amnesty is the road to the one-party state. The one-party state controlled by the unions and the communists. That is why he did it, people. And you have Republicans who tell you this is good for the GOP. These are not stupid people telling you this. They can add up numbers. I bet you they can tell you exactly the totals of the checks they got from the Chamber of Commerce. Yet they are willing to give the Democrats 8 million more votes with no plan to counter it. What do you call people, folks, who sell out their own party and their own country for a bit of campaign cash?
Traitors.
Well, you said it, people. I'm not going to argue with you. The other thing my book is about is the individuals. Because I think these people should be held accountable for what they're doing to your country, folks. The book profiles 51 members of the House and 14 senators. That's just the start. The next edition will have even more. But the point I'm making, I'll ask another question. Anybody in this room, not counting military, ever applied for a federal government job who is willing to admit it? One or two of you? Mainly private sector people here. Okay, well, here's a question. Most federal government jobs, especially high level, do you need an FBI security check to get those positions? I'll tell you, you do. They even used to do them in the post office, people. And they can go through your underwear drawers, folks. They check out your family background, overseas travel, political affiliations, criminal convictions, dodgy relatives. I had a friend who applied for a federal government job in Virginia about 2 years ago, not even high level. The FBI sent 2 agents all the way to Canada to interview this man's communist uncle. And on the strength of that interview, my friend, a staunch conservative, was denied that position. And I'll tell you straight, folks, I support that. Because this is the federal government we're talking about here. This is the heart of the free world. The whole freedom of the Western Hemisphere, the Western Alliance, depends on you. And this country has enemies who have a history of using your weak and dishonest to betray you. And those betrayals can cost millions of lives. They could spark a nuclear attack. They could do all sorts of things to damage your country immeasurably. They need to be able to trust you. You might have state secrets under your control one day. You might be guarding the president. You might be guarding a nuclear facility or a municipal water supply. They need to trust you. But what if you're a Marxist radical who hangs around with the Communist Party and they have the ability to dress you up nice and get you elected as a Democrat? They control the unions. They control the local Democratic Party. Someone like Keith Ellison or Betty McCollum. Someone like Al Franken, or Barbara Boxer, or Nancy Pelosi, or Barbara Lee, or George Miller, or Rosa DeLauro, or Danny Davis, or Jan Schakowsky, or Jerry Nadler, or Tammy Baldwin, or Patty Murray. Someone who is secretly a Marxist now serving in your Congress or your Senate, where they may serve on the Homeland Security Committee, or the Science and Technology Committee, or the Armed Services Committee, or the Judiciary Committee, or even the Intelligence Committee, folks. And if you think that's far-fetched, Nancy Pelosi just appointed Andre Carson of Indiana to the Intelligence Committee, which oversees all 16 of your intelligence agencies. A man with known Marxist and Muslim Brotherhood ties now serves on your Intelligence Committee. You can have access to all sorts of secret information, and you can have the ability to influence public policy, not just on a national level, but an international level. How much of an FBI security check does that one need, folks? Virtually nothing. In many instances, nothing at all. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? How's that working out, guys? Not too good, right? Think about it. Think about this. What they did to Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin. Nothing was off limits with them, because they might be leading your country someday, and you had a right to know everything about their character. They were so proud to tell you everything that was in Sarah Palin's kids' Facebook pages, everything that Mitt Romney did with Bain Capital, about what he did with his dog on holiday, about allegedly beating up some young gay kid when he was 17. Nothing was off limits with them, people. But why does the media not tell you about the elephant's graveyard of a skeletons in Obama's closet? Or Al Franken's? Or Amy Klobuchar's? Or Keith Ellison's? Why does having a DFL after your name automatically make you a person of safe and secure character? I would have thought quite the opposite, actually. You imagine if you're a foreign intelligence officer serving the United Nations under diplomatic cover, and they have hundreds of them, from Iran and Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela and China and Russia. And they had networks through your country and your communist parties and your labour movement. And some of those networks had the ability to elect their secret members and sympathisers into your Congress or your Senate, where they could feed back all sorts of information to your enemies. Do you think those foreign intelligence officers are so stupid and lazy they do not exploit that opportunity? A massive hole in your national security, folks. The most powerful legislators in the Western world, virtually no security checks. Do you think your enemies are so stupid and lazy they do not exploit that against you? Because if you don't, I've got a bridge out in Brooklyn you might be interested in talking to me about later, folks. People, if these foreign agents don't do their work properly, they might not go home to a fat pension. They might go home to the gulag. You think they're going to ignore this massive hole in your national security? I quote Raul Castro in my book, boasting to the Cuban Communist Party newspaper Granma how members of your Congressional Black Caucus, which includes Keith Ellison, about 40 members, go down to Cuba on a regular basis. Some of them have been there 7 or 8 times, to talk to the Castros how they're going to work inside your Congress to change your foreign policy to ease trade and travel restrictions on Cuba. So basically, the Cubans can send more spies and more terrorists and more drugs to your country and stir up more Ferguson rallies and more Baltimore riots than they already are doing. What do you call it, folks, when someone goes from your country to an enemy foreign country to help them against you?
Yeah.
What's the penalty for that one, folks?
Yeah.
So why is it happening every day and nobody says a word about it? The media covers for them, people. And there's the old saying, why doth treason never prosper? Because when treason prospers, none dare call it treason. When it's so endemic and everybody's doing it, nobody dares to call it out. And it's been going on for a while, folks. I want to ask another question. Any Vietnam veterans in the room today? Several of you. First thing I'll say is thank you, gentlemen. Then I want to ask a question, if I may, or a few questions. One of them was pretty dumb, but bear with me. Was the Vietnam War lost in the jungles of Vietnam?
No.
Very emphatic. Okay, is it true that your troops, the American troops, had a lot of very tough rules of engagement? Couldn't return fire till asking permission, couldn't chase the enemy to certain places, couldn't bomb certain harbours, couldn't hold territory, had to retreat and allow the enemy to re-infiltrate? Yeah. Is any of that true?
Yes.
Is it true that, here's a dumb question. Did those rules of engagement hamper your ability to fight and win that war?
Yes.
So had you been allowed to fight it like you were in World War II, to take the fight to the heart of the enemy and fight to actually win, could you have won that war and won it pretty quickly?
No doubt.
People say to me 6 months, maybe a year tops. And is it also true that when you withdrew, your Congress defunded the South Vietnamese military, guaranteeing a communist takeover? Okay, so you lost 58,000 men in that war, folks. Your brothers, your cousins, your classmates. I guarantee every single person in this room was touched in some way by that war. Not to mention the millions of Vietnamese who were imprisoned, tortured, and executed after the communist victory. Is any of that true? You lost 58,000 men, hundreds of thousands of wounded, and a war that could have been won in a year, which would have meant that tens of thousands of your countrymen would still be alive today. Would they not?
Yes.
I would say this: that war was deliberately sabotaged in your Congress, mainly by Democrats like Father Drinan of Massachusetts, who deliberately worked to, as I say, to sabotage your war effort. How many of those congressmen who sold your troops down the river, how many of them paid a single penalty for what they did, folks? I will say this: most of those Democrats were working hand in glove with the Communist Party USA, which was taking its orders directly from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was allied to the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Do you think there might have been a little bit of treason going on there, folks?
Amen.
And as I say, how many of them paid a single penalty for it, people? One of them is now Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And John Conyers from Michigan is still in Congress, people. How long has he been there now? 140, 160 years? But think about it. One of your most senior congressmen. He headed Congress's most powerful committee, the Judiciary Committee, the body that writes federal law, folks. He still serves on it. That is also the body that oversees the Federal Bureau of Investigation and sets its budget. Which organisation is supposed to be rooting out the traitors from your government, folks? So John Conyers has got a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. Read about it in the book. He's 40 years with Democratic Socialists of America, a card-carrying member of that communist group. 20 years at least with the Workers' World Party, the most vicious communist party in your country. They support Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. John Conyers is a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist. As hardcore as you can get, folks. Yet he oversaw the budget of the FBI. What do you think would happen to the FBI's budget if they ever came after John Conyers or his many other communist friends in your Congress, folks? Do you think they're going to bite the hand that feeds them? So if you're a communist and you stand for election as a Democrat, there's no security checks, and once you're in there, the FBI doesn't dare to touch you. Think of the implications of that one, folks. Think about Charlie Rangel on the Ways and Means Committee, the body that writes federal tax law. You know those tax laws that help your businesses to prosper? You know those ones? Doesn't obey them, but he writes them. Charlie Rangel has a 50-year history with the communist movement, member of 2 Soviet fronts that I know about, invited Fidel Castro to Harlem in 1995 for a big festival, pictures in my book of them smiling together. You think Charlie Rangel's ever going to support tax reform for you guys?
No.
Rosa DeLauro, one of your very top Democrats, pictures in my book of her hugging her best friend, Joel Fishman, the head of the Connecticut Communist Party, inside the headquarters of the Connecticut Communist Party, where she has an office. What about Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, the senator from Wisconsin, member of the Colombian Support Network? That is a communist front, includes people like Bernardine Dawn, the Weather Underground terrorist, Obama's buddy. It's a group that supports Colombia's Marxist-Leninist FARC guerrillas. They are known as narco-terrorists because they support their revolution by selling cocaine into this country. She has used her position on several occasions to try and get US military aid cut off to the Colombian government so they can do to your ally Colombia what they did to your ally South Vietnam. And if she succeeds and Colombia falls to the communists, guess what? They'll send even more cocaine to your country. People, you've got at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your Senate who are so enmeshed with radical Islam and the communist movement that they would not pass a basic FBI security check to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither would your president. Does this explain some of your problems, people?
Yes.
The enemy at the gate is to be feared, but the enemy inside is way more dangerous, people, because they wear your clothes and they talk your language and they screw your country over while you're paying their salaries, folks. But I don't want to depress you people with any of that or bring you down in any way. I'm a little bit late.
Yes.
Sorry about that. You didn't come here to be depressed, did you? You came here for some hope and change, right? But look, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'll be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. But look, this is how I see it. 2008, the left thought they had a slam dunk in this country. They had the House, the Senate, and the White House. All of their ducks were in a row, people. And those 60s radicals who'd been burrowing through your Democratic Party and through your unions, their hour had come. And they were going to take you down. But in 2009 and 2010, something miraculous happened. What do you think it might have been, folks? Where had you been hiding, people? I didn't see you coming. You came out of nowhere and you blogged and you marched and you emailed and you rallied and you agitated and you phone banked and you put some spine into the GOP, and you people took back the House in 2010, folks. There's only one person in the country who doesn't know that, and that's Karl Rove. I'm going to say this. That saved this country. Because if you hadn't done it, people, they would have had everything through in the first 2 years. They would have got Obamacare straight through, straight to single payer, card check, cap and trade, green jobs. They would have had 8, 10, 20 million illegals voting in the last 2 elections. Where would you be then, guys? You saved America. You saved this country. And you may not see it in those terms, but without you, this country would be done. And you don't get a lot of thanks, but I'm here to say thank you, because like millions of others from overseas, we see how important you are. Now I want to do something now. It's going to take me just a few more minutes, but this is the most important part of my speech. I want to go back in history, because I get asked all the time, what do we do now? Where do we go? I've been to 43 of the 57 states, folks, of this country. Just checking for Democrats in the room, right? And I get asked the same question all the time. Where do we go? Do we work with the GOP? Do we form a third party? Do we just do local stuff? Well, this is my answer to this. And my only value to you is as an outside observer. Sometimes you can see a neighbour's situation more clearly than they can see their own. You have to win the next election, people, because if you don't, the Democrats are going to dissolve the southern border and import as many new voters as they need. They're going to bring hundreds of thousands in from the Middle East, and they are going to swamp you. That is their plan. They don't ever intend to give up power again. Now you have to win, folks. There's only one force that can stop them in the time we have left, and that is the GOP. But the real question is this: what will the character of that GOP be? Because if the old guard, the Karl Roves, have their way, and they give you a candidate like Jeb, Common Core is wonderful, illegal immigration is an act of love, Bush, you're toast, folks. Because the Tea Party will stay home, the Republican base will split, and either Hillary Clinton or Pocahontas Warren or Bernie Sanders will be your next president, folks. So what do? Well, here's my suggestion. I want to go back in history. 1976. This country had been losing its freedoms, Republican, Democrat, for decades. Now, people were pretty darn disgusted, but they had no option. But that year, they got a choice. That year, a man came out of California who spoke of a shining city on the hill and peace through strength and liberty and the Constitution. And people just like you rallied to Ronald Reagan's message, folks. And they joined the GOP and got behind him, and they thought, we will be welcomed. We will take this country back. And what did the Rockefeller Republicans, the Karl Roves of the day, what did they think of Ronald Reagan and his supporters, folks? Hated him, despised him. Ronald Reagan was far too extreme to be elected. Ronald Reagan would destroy and divide the GOP. Ronald Reagan was banned from Ohio in 1976 by the Ohio State GOP, folks. They hated him, and they just beat him, and they gave the nomination to Gerald Ford. Ford went up against Jimmy Carter, and Carter won. How did those Carter years work out, guys? Barrel laughs, were they? Interest rates up to here, gas queues round the corner, gave away the Panama Canal, gutted your military, Iranian hostage crisis, your second worst ever president, folks. You remember, people, there were people seriously saying in those Carter years that America would never be great again. Can you remember that? But the really important point is this. The grassroots, the people just like you, took over the GOP from the bottom, the precinct committees, half of which are vacant half the time, the township committees, and when Reagan ran again in 1980, this time they were ready, and this time they were not going to take no for an answer. They got him the nomination, people. He went up against Jimmy Carter, and he took him out 48 states to 2. Not bad for an unelectable candidate, right? Folks, the Iranian hostages were back on the first day. The interest rates went down. The taxes went down. The economy boomed. He rebuilt your military, and he rebuilt the pride in this country. And he took out the Soviet Union without firing a shot. Any better president in the 20th century? Anyone even close? And why did you have a Reagan revolution, folks? Because for once, people just like you got to decide the candidate. Could there be a message for today? Because right now, this country is Jimmy Carter on steroids, folks. And we need Ronald Reagan on meth to turn this around, guys. Not just to go where Reagan did, way beyond Reagan. You've got to gut your federal government and restore your constitution. You know that. But how do you do it? Reagan was a genius. He could unite the social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives, the defence conservatives, the three-legged stool of the Reagan coalition. But right now, your base is very fractured. You've got 1 million libertarians who gave their vote to Gary Johnson last time. You've got Tea Party Republicans, moderate Republicans, social conservatives, fiscal conservatives. You've got 4 million GOPers who didn't even vote last time. And you've got upwards of 30 million evangelical Christians who are not even registered. Think of what they could do to transform this country, both politically and spiritually, if they took on their responsibilities, folks. So how do you unite them? Because you may not know this, but there's a bit of division in your base. Had you heard that? A little bit of fighting, Tea Party, Republican, Karl Rove, you know. 18 months out from the most important election in American history, folks. The most important election in world history. Can we afford to be divided against the Democrats?
No.
See, the Democrats have a smaller base than you, but they can bribe every element of it with your money. You can't bribe your base, you have to inspire your base. Why don't 30 million Christians even register, folks? Why do 4 million GOPers stay home? Because they're not inspired to get off their backsides to vote, folks. And there's not many politicians who can inspire. Reagan could inspire, Sarah Palin could inspire, but can you think of many others that could do that? So we need an inspirational candidate, folks, but we need more than that. I'm going to pick a candidate. You can pick anyone you like, because it's the principle that's most important. I'm going to go with Ted Cruz, because I think he's the most inspirational. So this could be Scott Walker, it could be someone else. So this is what I would do if I was Ted Cruz. I would go to all of the elements of your base right now and say something like this. We need to get united. We may have one more chance at this, and that's it. But I know you will not unify unless you have an incentive to do so. This is what we're going to do, folks. The first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to name my vice presidential candidate early, right now, Alan West. Right now. And then to get you libertarians on board, I'm going to make Rand Paul the Secretary of my Treasury, and he can do what he damn well wants to the Federal Reserve and the IRS. And then for you energy voters, Sarah Palin, Secretary of Energy, and it's going to be drill, baby, drill. Drill in your backyard if you want to. And Scott Walker, Secretary of Labour, right to work in every state, folks. Mike Lee, Secretary of the Interior, and you know those federal lands they think they own? His job is going to be to give them all back to the states so they can mine and farm them and make some money for their people, folks. Then it's going to be Michelle Bachmann, Secretary of Commerce.
Yeah!
And she's going to deregulate. Get rid of the EPA, get rid of OSHA, get American businesses working again, people. And then for Secretary of Health and Human Services, it's going to be Dr. Ben Carson. He's going to get rid of the welfare culture in this country and restore dignity to your communities. And then Secretary of State has to be John Bolton. And his job is going to be to flip the bird to Mr. Putin and the Ayatollahs and to restore the Western Alliance. And then, very important, Ambassador to the United Nations. No one. Trey Gowdy, Attorney General. Go after the vote fraudsters, people, prosecute and jail them.
Oh, yeah.
And then, for those millions of Christians, if they're not already inspired, they don't care about politics, but they do care about the education of their children. They don't want Common Core, they love homeschooling. I would say to them, vote for our ticket and your millions will make David Barton Secretary of Education. Mr. Cruz, name your entire cabinet and run as a team across this nation. Would you guys be inspired by a team like that? And would it unify the base? Because everybody's getting something, right? Everybody, you may not like Sarah Palin, but you love Rand Paul. You may not like Scott Walker, but you love John Bolton. Everybody's got someone to get them fired up and a clear policy direction. And doesn't every element of your base deserve representation, folks?
Yes.
Aren't you all Americans?
Yes.
Because right now, people, every 4 years, Republicans play a quarterback against an entire offensive team of the liberal media. Why not play your team against their team? You imagine a team like that running across this country, holding mass rallies in every state. You imagine the enthusiasm that would generate. You imagine the union guys who would vote Republican just to get their sons and daughters work on the energy fields. The liberal soccer moms who'd vote Republican just to get rid of Common Core. So what I'm asking for you people is 1.5 years of the hardest political work you have ever done. I know what this cost you. I know the work you put into this, and I'm asking for more of it, folks, because 18 months is going to decide the fate of not just this country, but my country. Not just your children, but my children. I can't promise you very much, but I can promise you two things. If you do nothing, your children will live in slavery in this land. But if you give it everything you have got, folks, everything that's within you for your country and your constitution, the very least I can promise you is the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I could. And if you win, and you can win, you will give your children not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. Is that worth fighting for?
Yeah.
So, I just want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for your country, for my country, and for liberty. God bless America, and God bless the Tea Party. Thank you.
Stand up, give it a big hand.